Sunlight streamed through the bay window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. It was a beautiful afternoon, the kind I usually savored with a cup of tea in the garden of our Bellevue home in the quiet Somerset neighborhood. But today, Gerald sat stiffly on the edge of the antique love seat, his face drawn and pale. "I want a divorce, Dorothy." The words hung in the air, fragile as spun glass, shattering the familiar comfort of our living room. My breath hitched. "What?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Had I misheard? 28 years, could 28 years simply evaporate into a single, curt sentence? He shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. "It's just its time. Dorothy, we've grown apart." He muttered something about needing space, about finding himself. I stared at him, the man I'd built a life with, the man who had promised forever beneath a shower of confetti and the approving smiles of our families. "Grown apart," I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "Is there someone else?" I had to ask the question, a painful splinter lodged in my throat. He hesitated, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, then quickly shook his head. "No, it's not like that." His denial lacked conviction, but I couldn't press him. The reality was crashing down on me, a tidal wave of disbelief and hurt. "Where will you go?" I managed to ask, my voice trembling. He cleared his throat, fiddling with his wedding ring. The casual gesture sent a fresh bang through me. "I've been staying at the club for a few weeks. I'll be looking for a place of my own soon." The club, of course. The exclusive enclave where he'd been spending more and more time lately. Networking, he'd called it. Networking with whom? I wondered bitterly. He rose to his feet, his movements abrupt. "I need to go," he said, not meeting my eyes. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He placed it on the coffee table between us. "I think you should keep this," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. It was the antique diamond brooch, a family heirloom he'd gifted me on our 10th anniversary, a symbol of our enduring love. He'd said, now it felt like a parting gift, a token of dismissal. "Gerald," I began, the words catching in my throat. I wanted to ask him why, to beg him to reconsider, to tell him that we could fix whatever was broken. But the look on his face, distant and resolute, stopped me. He turned and walked out, the closing of the front door echoing the finality of his words. I sat there numb, the velvet box a cold weight on the glass table. The silence in the house was deafening, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, a relentless reminder of the passage of time, of all the years we'd shared, now reduced to nothing. Later that evening, the doorbell rang. It was Marcus, our son, his face creased with a mixture of concern and was it pity, Mom? He said, his voice strained. "Are you all right?" I managed a weak smile. "I'll be fine, Marcus." He shifted from foot to foot, his eyes darting around the room. "Dad called," he said, finally. "He told me everything." He hesitated, then sat down beside me, taking my hand. "Mom, I know this is hard," he began, his voice gentle. "But Dad's right. You both deserve to be happy." His words stung. Deserve to be happy? Had I not been happy? Had our life together, the home we'd built, the memories we'd shared, been nothing but a charade? Marcus, I said, my voice tight. Your father just walked out after 28 years of marriage. How can you possibly say that? He sighed, squeezing my hand. Mom, Dad's been unhappy for a long time. You know that. I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. No, I didn't. If he was unhappy, why didn't he tell me? Why didn't we try to work things out? Marcus's expression changed, a subtle hardening around his eyes. Look, Mom, he said, his voice taking on a sharper edge. Stephanie and I have discussed this. We think it's best if you move out. The words hit me like a physical blow. Move out from my home, the home I'd lived in for over 2 decades, the home where I'd raised my children, where I'd nurtured my dreams and built a life. Move out, I repeated, my voice rising. Where am I supposed to go? Marcus looked down at his hands, avoiding my gaze. Dad said he's willing to give you a generous settlement. You can find a nice apartment, maybe downsize. It'll be a fresh start for you. A fresh start. The words echoed hollowly in the room. Downsize. As if my life, my memories, my sense of self could be neatly packaged and reduced to fit into a smaller space. I looked at my son, the boy I'd cradled in my arms, the young man I'd poured my heart and soul into raising, and in that moment, I saw not the loving son I knew, but a stranger. His loyalty shifted, his priorities realigned. He was no longer on my side. He'd chosen Gerald. He'd chosen Stephanie. He'd chosen their opulent world, their glittering social circle, their unspoken disdain for everything I represented. A quiet resolve began to harden within me, a cold, hard knot forming in the pit of my stomach. I see, I said, my voice calm, almost detached. Well, Marcus, you tell your father and Stephanie, tell them I'll be in touch. He seemed relieved, a quick smile flashing across his face. He kissed me on the cheek, a perfunctory gesture that felt more like a dismissal than a sign of affection. And then he left. I sat there, alone in the gathering dusk, the silence of the house pressing in on me. But this time, the silence wasn't deafening. It was filled with a quiet hum, a low, steady current of something new, something powerful. It was the sound of my resolve, the sound of a plan taking shape, a plan for a future they couldn't imagine, a future where I would not only survive, but thrive, a future where I would have my revenge. Rain lashed against the windows, mirroring the storm raging inside me. This is our house now, Mother, Marcus said, his voice tight. He stood in the doorway, Stephanie hovering behind him, a smirk playing on her lips. We're moving my in-laws in, just hours after Gerald had dropped the divorce bomb. My own son was throwing me out of the home I'd shared with his father for 28 years. My head swam. But where am I supposed to go? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Stephanie shrugged, her eyes cold. That's not our problem. Is it? Marcus shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. Look, Mom, it's just practical. Julian's parents need a place, and this house is bigger. He gestured vaguely around the living room, at the family photos still lining the mantelpiece. Photos of happier times, of birthdays and holidays, of a family that no longer existed. They're selling their place, Stephanie chimed in, her tone sharp. They need to be closer to Julian. Julian. Always Julian. Everything revolved around her precious Julian, her perfect, wealthy Julian. I sank onto the sofa, the floral cushions suddenly feeling unfamiliar, alien. "So you're just evicting me." The word tasted bitter on my tongue. Marcus finally met my eyes, a flicker of guilt in their depths. "It's not like that, Mom. We just need the space." He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture so like his father it made my heart ache. "Besides," Stephanie added, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "you'll be able to find something smaller, something more manageable. Now that you're alone." Each word was a dagger, twisting deeper into the wound. Alone. That's what I was. Alone, betrayed, and cast aside like an unwanted piece of furniture. I looked at Marcus, at the son I had raised, the boy I had nursed through chickenpox and cheered on at soccer games. He was a stranger now, his eyes filled with a coldness I had never seen before. "When do I need to be out?" I asked, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "By the end of the week," Stephanie answered promptly, already glancing around the room as if planning where to put her own things. She pointed towards the antique grandfather clock in the corner. "That'll have to go. It's far too old-fashioned. My grandmother had given me that clock. It had been in our family for generations." I bit back the tears that threatened to spill. "Fine," I managed to say, my voice trembling slightly. "I'll be out by the end of the week." The rest of the conversation was a blur. Boxes were brought in. Stephanie's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell, arrived, their faces radiating smug satisfaction. They surveyed the house with proprietary airs, commenting on the furniture, the decor, the view from the garden. It was as if I were already invisible, a ghost haunting my own home. I watched them, a strange calm settling over me. The shock had worn off, replaced by a quiet resolve. I would not beg. I would not plead. I would leave. But I would not be broken. That night, I packed a small suitcase with essentials, leaving most of my belongings behind. It was too painful to sift through a lifetime of memories, of trinkets and photographs and souvenirs of a life that had been ripped away from me. I lay awake, listening to the rain and the muffled sounds of the Caldwells settling into my home. The injustice of it all burned in my chest, a slow, simmering anger. I had been a good wife, a devoted mother. I had given everything to my family, and this was my reward. As dawn broke, I slipped out of the house, leaving behind the only life I had ever known. I had nowhere to go, no plan, no money. But as I walked away, a flicker of something sparked within me, a tiny ember of defiance, a refusal to be extinguished. I had been underestimated. They thought I was weak, that I would crumble. They were wrong. I would rebuild my life, brick by brick. I would find my own way, my own happiness. And one day, they would regret the day they cast me aside. One day, they would see what I was truly capable of. The rain had stopped, and a sliver of sunlight broke through the clouds. I took a deep breath, the cool air filling my lungs. It was a new beginning, and I would make sure it was one they would never forget. I knew just the person to call. Rain lashed against the windows, mimicking the storm raging inside me. Barefoot, I stood amidst the shards of what was once my favorite porcelain vase, a gift from Gerald on our 10th anniversary. "Get out!" Stephanie had hissed, her face contorted with a coldness I'd never seen before. "You're not welcome here anymore." My own son, Marcus, stood silently behind her, his eyes averted. He wouldn't even look at me. The echo of their cruel words bounced off the bare walls I had painstakingly chosen and decorated, walls that had witnessed 28 years of laughter, tears, and what I foolishly thought was unwavering love. "This is my house now," Stephanie added, her voice dripping with venom. "And you have 5 minutes to get your things and leave." 5 minutes. 28 years reduced to 5 minutes. I looked around the hollowed-out shell of my living room, boxes stacked haphazardly, furniture draped in dust sheets, the remnants of a life I no longer recognized. "But where will I go?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The question hung in the air, unanswered. Stephanie simply tapped her foot impatiently, her gaze fixed on the expensive watch adorning her wrist, a stark reminder of the wealth and status that had seduced my son. He had changed so much since meeting her. My Marcus, the sweet, thoughtful boy who used to bring me wild flowers from the garden, had become a stranger. Bending down, I carefully picked my way through the broken porcelain, each shard a tiny, sharp reflection of my shattered heart. I gathered a few essential belongings, a small suitcase, a worn photo album, a change of clothes. As I reached for a framed photograph of Marcus as a child, Stephanie snatched it from my hand. "Leave it," she snapped. "It belongs here now." The casual cruelty of her words was a physical blow. I stumbled back, my hand instinctively going to my chest as if to physically hold my heart together. Leaving the photograph felt like leaving a piece of myself behind, but I knew I couldn't argue. I couldn't fight. The fight had been drained out of me, replaced by a hollow ache that spread through my limbs. I walked out of the house, the rain instantly soaking my hair and clothes. I didn't even have shoes. I had nothing. Looking back at the house, a wave of nausea washed over me. This wasn't just a house. It was my home filled with memories of birthdays, holidays, and ordinary, precious moments. Now, it was a fortress against me, a symbol of my utter defeat. I walked aimlessly, the cold rain seeping into my bones. The world blurred around me, a kaleidoscope of unfamiliar streets and faces. Where was I supposed to go? What was I supposed to do? The questions echoed in my mind, a relentless chorus of despair. I found myself sitting on a park bench, shivering and numb, watching the world go by as if I were a ghost, detached and invisible. A young couple strolled past, hand in hand, their laughter a sharp contrast to the silence that enveloped me. I envied their simple happiness, the effortless connection they shared. Once I had that. Once I was part of a family, a unit, a whole. Now I was adrift, a piece of flotsam tossed aside by the tide. As the sky darkened, a strange sense of calm washed over me. The despair began to recede, replaced by a flicker of something else, something harder, colder. Sitting there on that cold, wet bench, I made a decision. I wouldn't let them break me. I wouldn't let them win. I would rebuild my life, brick by brick, stronger and more resilient than ever before. I would find a way to stand on my own 2 feet again. I would find a way to make them regret what they had done. A faint smile touched my lips. They thought they had won, that they had stripped me of everything. They had no idea what I was capable of. They had underestimated me, and that, I realized, was their biggest mistake. The rain continued to fall, but I no longer felt the chill. A fire had been lit within me, a fire of determination, a fire of quiet, simmering rage. I would rise from the ashes, stronger and more powerful than they could ever imagine. I would have my revenge, and it would be sweet. For now, though, I needed shelter. I needed to find a place to dry off, to think, to plan. I stood up, the rain plastering my clothes to my skin. The world was still blurry, but my vision was clear. I had a long way to go, but I knew where I needed to start. Rain lashed against the window pane, mirroring the storm inside me. My home office, once a sanctuary where I managed our family finances, now felt like a cage. The mahogany desk Gerald had gifted me for our 10th anniversary mocked me with its polished surface, reflecting the hollow ache in my chest. 28 years. 28 years I'd poured my heart and soul into this family, only to be discarded like yesterday's newspaper. It's for the best, Dorothy, Gerald had said, his voice devoid of any emotion. You'll understand eventually. Understand how my own son, Marcus, could turn his back on me, siding with his wife Stephanie and her ludicrously wealthy family. Mom, you need to move on, he'd echoed, his tone chillingly similar to his father's. This house is too much for you now. I ran a trembling hand over the smooth leather of my desk chair, the one I'd chosen myself, a small act of defiance in a life largely dictated by Gerald's ambitions. The chair still held the imprint of my body, a testament to the countless hours I'd spent here, balancing budgets, planning family vacations, organizing Marcus's birthday parties. I'd always been the anchor, the steady hand guiding our family ship through calm waters and stormy seas. Now, I was adrift, cast overboard without a life raft. You're stronger than you think, Dorothy, I whispered to myself, the words catching in my throat. My reflection in the darkened window stared back, a stranger with haunted eyes. Was I strong? I'd always prided myself on my resilience, my ability to weather any storm. But this felt different. This was a betrayal that cut to the bone, a wound that refused to heal. I rose from the chair, my legs shaky, and walked over to the bookshelf, my fingers tracing the spines of familiar volumes. Cookbooks I'd used to create countless family meals, gardening guides that had helped me transform our backyard into a vibrant oasis, financial textbooks I'd studied diligently to manage our investments. Each book held a memory, a piece of the life I'd built, the life that had been ripped away from me. Don't be dramatic, Dorothy, Stephanie had sneered during their last visit. It's just a house. Just a house. It was more than bricks and mortar. It was the place where I'd raised my son, nurtured my marriage, created a home. My gaze fell on a framed photograph on the bookshelf, a picture of Marcus as a little boy, beaming at the camera, his gap-toothed grin infectious. My heart ached with a fierce, primal longing. I picked up the photo, my fingers tracing his small, cherubic face. "Mommy loves you," I whispered, my voice cracking. How could he do this to me? How could he let Stephanie and her family poison him against me? "She's just after your money, Marcus," I'd warned him when they first started dating. She doesn't care about you." He'd scoffed, blinded by infatuation. "You're wrong, Mom. Stephanie loves me." Now, I wondered if he regretted those words. I placed the photo back on the shelf, a wave of exhaustion washing over me. The fight had drained out of me. I sank back into my chair, the leather cool against my skin. The rain continued its relentless assault on the window, the rhythmic drumming a lullaby of despair. What was I going to do? Where was I going to go? I had no job, no savings, no home. "You'll be fine," Dorothy, Gerald, had said dismissively. "You're a smart woman. You'll figure something out." Figure something out. After dedicating my life to my family, I was now expected to simply reinvent myself, to start over from scratch at an age when most people were thinking about retirement. A flicker of anger ignited within me, a small ember in the vast emptiness. Fine. I would figure something out. I wouldn't let them break me. I wouldn't let them see me crumble. I would rebuild my life, brick by brick, and I would emerge stronger, more resilient than ever before. They thought they could cast me aside, discard me like a worn-out garment. They had underestimated me. They had no idea what I was capable of. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk, my hand brushing against a familiar object. It was a small, leather-bound journal, a gift from my grandmother, filled with her handwritten recipes and gardening tips. I hadn't looked at it in years. I pulled it out, the leather soft and worn under my fingertips. As I flipped through the pages, my eyes fell on a handwritten note tucked inside the back cover. It was from my grandmother, written in her elegant script. "A woman's strength is not measured by the size of her bank account, but by the resilience of her spirit." The words resonated with me, a spark of hope igniting within me. My grandmother had been right. I had more strength than I realized. I would not be defeated. I would rise from the ashes like a phoenix and reclaim my life. This wasn't the end. This was a new beginning, and I had a feeling they would all regret the day they underestimated Dorothy Miller. The faintest hint of a smile played on my lips. The rain outside had stopped. The storm within me was just beginning to brew. Rain lashed against the attic window, mimicking the storm inside me. I sifted through boxes filled with the debris of a life I no longer recognized. 28 years. 28 years I'd poured my heart and soul into that family, only to be discarded like an old, worn-out coat. "You're embarrassing us, Mother," Stephanie had sneered, her perfectly manicured hand flitting dismissively. "Julian's family expects a certain standard." My fingers brushed against a faded photograph. Gerald, Marcus, and I beaming at the camera during a trip to the coast. Marcus, just a boy then, his arms slung around my shoulder. "Mum, you're the best," he'd exclaimed, his voice ringing with childish adoration. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. Where was that boy now, buried beneath layers of ambition and Julian's expensive suits, I suppose? I picked up another box, its contents a jumble of old journals and letters. Gerald's handwriting, once so familiar, now seemed like a relic from another lifetime. "My dearest Dorothy," one letter began. The ink faded, but the words still legible. "I can't wait to start our life together, to build a home filled with love and laughter. Love and laughter." What a cruel joke. Our home, the one I nurtured and cherished, was now occupied by Stephanie and Marcus, its walls echoing with their laughter that no longer included me. Another photograph caught my eye. Me younger, my hair longer and darker, standing proudly next to a display of intricately decorated cakes. It was from the county fair, the year I won first prize for my lemon meringue pie. "This is amazing," Dorothy Gerald had said, his eyes sparkling with pride. "You have a real gift." He'd encouraged me then, supported my dream of opening a small bakery. "We'll make it happen, darling," he'd promised, his hand clasped tightly in mine. But we had become and his dreams had eclipsed mine. His career had taken off, demanding more and more of his time, and my dreams, like the delicate icing on a forgotten cake, had slowly melted away. I ran my fingers over the faded ribbons tucked inside the box, each one a testament to my forgotten passion. First place, second place, best in show. For a brief moment, a spark of something akin to defiance flickered within me. They thought they could erase me, dismiss me as a relic of the past. They thought I was finished. But I wasn't. Not yet. I remembered the day Marcus announced his engagement to Stephanie. "She's perfect, Mom," he'd gushed, his eyes shining with a love that mirrored Gerald's in those old letters. "She's everything I've ever wanted. Everything I've ever wanted." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken judgment. I knew what he meant. Stephanie was everything I wasn't: sophisticated, wealthy, connected. She came from old money, a world of country clubs and private jets, a world Gerald desperately craved. I was just me, the woman who baked pies and tended her garden, the woman who no longer fit into their gleaming new world. I closed the box, the memories swirling inside me like the dust motes dancing in the attic's dim light. They thought they had won. They thought they had reduced me to nothing. "You'll be fine, Mother," Marcus had said, his voice laced with a condescending pity that grated on my nerves. "You can always find a small apartment somewhere, a small apartment." After 28 years of building a home, a life, a family, I was offered a small apartment. I stood up, my joints creaking in protest, and walked over to the window. The rain had stopped, and a sliver of sunlight peeked through the clouds. I took a deep breath, the crisp air filling my lungs. A plan began to form, the seed of an idea taking root in the fertile ground of my resentment. They had underestimated me. They had forgotten who I was, what I was capable of. They had taken everything from me: my home, my family, my sense of self. But they had also inadvertently given me something. They had given me a purpose. I remembered something Gerald had said years ago, during one of his business trips. He'd been talking about a colleague, a man who had lost everything in a risky investment. He put all his eggs in one basket. Gerald had scoffed, shaking his head. Never a wise move. I hadn't understood then, but now, standing in that dusty attic, surrounded by the remnants of my shattered life, I understood perfectly. They had put all their eggs in one basket: their wealth, their status, their connections. They had built their empire on a foundation of sand, and I, the woman they had discarded, held the key to the tide. I wouldn't beg, I wouldn't plead. I would rebuild, and when the time was right, I would show them exactly what I was capable of. The sunlight felt warmer now, a promise of a new dawn. They had taken my past, but they wouldn't steal my future. I had plans, big plans, and they involved a lot more than just baking pies. Rain lashed against the windows, mirroring the storm inside me. I picked up the worn photo album, its leather cover softened by years of handling. Inside, snapshots of happier times mocked me Gerald, and I beaming on our wedding day, Marcus, as a gap-toothed boy, family holidays, Christmas mornings. All gone, I whispered, the words catching in my throat. Just like that. Stephanie's voice, sharp and dismissive, echoed in my ears. This house is Julian's and mine now. You need to find somewhere else to live. I closed the album with a snap, the sound oddly final. It was time to stop mourning what I'd lost and start building something new. My resolve hardened with each gust of wind rattling the panes. I wouldn't let them break me. I wouldn't let them win. I opened my laptop, the familiar glow a small comfort in the darkening room. For years, I'd poured my energy into supporting Gerald's career, managing our household, raising Marcus. My own ambitions, my own dreams, had been quietly shelved. Now, I murmured, tapping a finger on the keyboard. It's my turn. My background in accounting, though rusty from disuse, was a solid foundation. I started researching online courses, refreshing my knowledge of tax law and financial planning. The hours flew by, the rhythmic click of the keys a soothing counterpoint to the turmoil within. The first few days were a blur of online tutorials, webinars, and practice exercises. My head ached, my eyes burned, but a strange sense of purpose began to take root. This isn't just about the money, I told myself, pacing the living room. It's about taking back control. The house felt different now, less like a sanctuary, more like a battleground. Every object seemed to whisper of betrayal, of broken promises. But they won't have the last word, I muttered, picking up a framed photo of Marcus as a child. I won't let them. I started small, offering bookkeeping services to local businesses. Word of mouth spread quickly, my reputation for meticulousness and discretion preceding me. Soon, I was working longer hours than I had in years, but this time, it was for myself. The money wasn't much at first, but each invoice paid, each satisfied client, was a victory. I'm doing this, I'd whisper to myself, a small smile playing on my lips. I'm actually doing this. One evening, while working late, I stumbled upon a niche market financial consulting for small, family-owned businesses facing succession issues. It was a complex area, requiring a delicate balance of financial acumen and interpersonal skills. Perfect, I thought, a thrill running through me. This is it. It was a chance to use my experience, not just in accounting, but in navigating family dynamics, the very thing that had been used against me. The first client I landed was a bakery, a beloved local institution facing a generational shift. The patriarch was ready to retire, but his children were squabbling over the future of the business. Sounds familiar, I thought wryly as I listened to their story. But this time, I was in a position to help, to mediate, to guide them towards a solution that benefited everyone. I worked tirelessly, poring over financial statements, interviewing family members, crafting a succession plan that addressed everyone's needs and preserved the legacy of the bakery. The day the family signed the agreement, tears of relief and gratitude streamed down their faces. "You saved us," the patriarch said, gripping my hand. "You saved our family." In that moment, I felt a profound sense of satisfaction, a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just about the money, though the fee I received was substantial. It was about using my skills, my experience, the very things I thought I'd lost, to make a real difference in someone else's life. As I walked home that evening, the city lights seemed to twinkle a little brighter. The air felt crisp and clean, the rain having finally stopped. I thought about Stephanie and Julian, tucked away in my old house, oblivious to the quiet revolution I was building. A slow smile spread across my face. They thought they had won. They thought they had taken everything from me. They had no idea what was coming. They had no idea the kind of woman I was becoming. I looked up at the night sky, a new sense of confidence swelling within me. This was just the beginning. The small apartment felt miles away from the grand house I'd once called home. It served as both my living space and my workspace now, a stark reminder of how much had changed. "It's not much," I'd admitted to my friend Sarah on the phone earlier, "but it's mine." And that, I realized as I set up my laptop on the makeshift desk, was more important than anything. For 28 years, I'd poured my energy into that house, into that family. I dedicated my life to them. I murmured to myself, adjusting the lamp. Now, after Gerald's betrayal and Marcus siding with Stephanie and her family, I was starting over. The sting of their words, "You're out of touch, Mom. This is Julian's family's house," now still resonated, a bitter echo in the quiet room. But I refused to let it define me. I opened my laptop, the familiar chime a small comfort in the unfamiliar surroundings. My fingers flew across the keyboard, years of experience resurfacing like muscle memory. I'd always been a skilled project manager, known for my meticulous planning and ability to bring even the most complex projects to fruition. "Just like that old house renovation," I muttered, a wry smile playing on my lips. I'd overseen every detail, from the initial blueprints to the final coat of paint, turning a dilapidated structure into the beautiful home it had become. And while that house was no longer mine, my skills were. They were the one thing Gerald and Marcus couldn't take away. My phone buzzed, interrupting my thoughts. It was a message from a former colleague, reminding me about an upcoming industry networking event. "Are you planning on attending?" he asked. "There'll be some big players there." I hesitated for a moment. Networking had always been Gerald's domain. I'd focused on the behind-the-scenes work, the quiet engine that kept everything running smoothly. But now, I needed to be my own advocate. "Yes," I typed back, "I'll be there." This wasn't just about finding a new project. It was about rebuilding my life, brick by brick. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Days were spent immersed in proposals, nights catching up on industry trends. I haven't felt this energized in years. I told Sarah during one of our calls. The small apartment, once a symbol of my reduced circumstances, began to feel like a sanctuary, a space where I could focus on my own goals. The muffled city sounds outside my window became a soundtrack to my renewed purpose. I was no longer Dorothy, the discarded wife and mother. I was Dorothy, the project manager, the strategist, the woman who was building her own future. One evening, while working late, I received an email. It was an invitation to submit a proposal for a large-scale development project, the kind that usually went to established firms, not independent consultants. "This is it," I whispered, my heart pounding in my chest. This was the chance I'd been waiting for, the opportunity to prove myself, not just to Gerald and Marcus, but to myself. I spent the next few days poring over the project details, meticulously crafting my proposal. "I won't let this slip through my fingers," I muttered, fueled by a quiet determination. I knew this project could be my stepping stone to something bigger, something that would finally allow me to leave the past behind. Finally, the day arrived to submit my proposal. I reread it one last time, a surge of confidence washing over me. "This is good," I said to myself, a genuine smile spreading across my face. "This is really good." I hit send, a wave of relief and anticipation washing over me. Now all I could do was wait. The following days were agonizing. I tried to distract myself with other work, but the anticipation was a constant hum beneath the surface. Then, one afternoon, the phone rang. It was the project lead, his voice filled with enthusiasm. "Dorothy," he said, "we were incredibly impressed with your proposal. We'd like to offer you the contract." I couldn't speak for a moment, overwhelmed by the news. "Thank you," I finally managed, my voice trembling slightly. "I won't disappoint you." As I hung up the phone, a wave of emotion washed over me. It was more than just relief. It was a sense of vindication, of triumph. I had done it. I had secured a major project, a project that would not only provide financial security, but also establish me as a force to be reckoned with in my field. And as I looked around my small apartment, I knew that this was just the beginning. The seeds of my revenge had been sown, and I had a feeling the harvest would be bountiful. I had a feeling that Stephanie and Julian, and even Gerald and Marcus, would soon realize just how much they had underestimated me. A small, almost imperceptible smile played on my lips. Christmas was just around the corner, and I had a few surprises up my sleeve. The celebratory buzz of the room was almost deafening, but I barely noticed. I was still replaying Stephanie's words in my head, that condescending little speech about how I was clearly not cut out for this kind of thing. "You wouldn't understand, Mother," she'd said, her nose wrinkled in that perpetually judgmental expression. "It's a different world." "Well, Stephanie, it certainly is a different world now." The crowd parted as Mr. Henderson, CEO of Henderson Technologies, approached me, a wide smile on his face. "Dorothy," he boomed, extending his hand. "Absolutely brilliant. Your presentation was the highlight of the evening." I shook his hand, a quiet satisfaction blooming within me. "Thank you, Mr. Henderson. I appreciate the opportunity." He chuckled. "Opportunity, my dear. You've created this opportunity yourself. The investors are clamoring to get on board. This project is going to be huge." The project. The very one Marcus had scoffed at. The one Julian had dismissed as a pipe dream. They had both assured me I was wasting my time, that I should just accept my retirement gracefully. "Honestly, Mom," Marcus had said, his voice dripping with condescension, "you're just not equipped to handle this kind of pressure." I remember the sting of those words, the way they echoed Stephanie's sentiments. reinforcing the feeling of being discarded, irrelevant. But I had refused to be defined by their limited vision. I knew my worth. I knew my capabilities. For years, I had supported Gerald, quietly managing our finances, navigating social circles, and nurturing my family. Those skills, honed over decades, were not liabilities. They were assets. And in the wake of Gerald's betrayal and my children's abandonment, they became my weapons. I channeled my grief, my anger, my hurt into something productive, something powerful. I researched, I networked, I poured every ounce of my being into developing this project. You're going to change the landscape of this entire industry, Dorothy, Mr. Henderson continued, his words pulling me back to the present. I've never seen such innovative thinking. You've truly outdone yourself. He leaned in conspiratorially. Off the record, of course. Several of my competitors were here tonight, scouting. They're green with envy. You've got them all scrambling. I smiled, a genuine, unforced smile. That's good to hear. The irony wasn't lost on me. Stephanie and Julian had been so eager to introduce Marcus to their influential circle, so proud of their connections. They had treated me like a dusty relic, a burden to be hidden away. Now, here I was, the center of attention, surrounded by the very people they so desperately wanted to impress, and they weren't even here to witness it. I'd like to propose a toast, Mr. Henderson announced, raising his glass, to Dorothy, a visionary, an innovator, and a force to be reckoned with. The room erupted in applause, the sound washing over me, a sweet symphony of success. I raised my glass, meeting Mr. Henderson's gaze. "Thank you," I said, my voice filled with emotion. This wasn't just about the project, the recognition, or even the financial windfall. This was about reclaiming my life, about proving to myself, and to everyone who had doubted me, that I was capable of anything. Later that evening, as the event wound down, I found myself standing alone by the window, overlooking the glittering city lights. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was a text from Marcus. "Heard your presentation went well. Congrats." The message was short, almost curt, but I could detect a hint of something else beneath the surface. Was it regret? Perhaps a flicker of respect. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. My silence spoke volumes. As I hailed a cab, I noticed a familiar car parked across the street. It was Stephanie's sleek, silver Mercedes, the one she'd boasted about endlessly. Julian was behind the wheel, and Stephanie was in the passenger seat, their faces illuminated by the glow of their phones. They were watching me, their expressions unreadable in the dim light. I met their gaze for a fleeting moment, a small, knowing smile playing on my lips. Then I turned away, stepped into the cab, and told the driver my address. It wasn't the grand mansion I had once shared with Gerald, the one Stephanie had so readily claimed as her own. It was something far more valuable, a penthouse apartment overlooking the city, a symbol of my newfound independence, a testament to my resilience, and it was all mine. As the cab pulled away, I glanced back at the Mercedes, still parked across the street, bathed in the shadows. I knew this was only the beginning. My revenge wasn't about petty squabbles or dramatic confrontations. It was about rebuilding my life, brick by brick, into something stronger, something more magnificent than they could ever imagine. And I was just getting started. Sunlight streamed through the French doors of my new living room, warming the polished wooden floor. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the potted lemon tree I'd placed by the window. It sent a bright counterpoint to the memory of Stephanie's sharp words. "This is our family home now. You need to find somewhere else to live." Those words, delivered with such chilling finality, had echoed in my ears for months, a constant reminder of the life I'd lost. But now, surrounded by the soft hues and quiet elegance of my own space, they finally felt distant, almost unreal. I took a slow sip of my tea, the delicate porcelain cup a far cry from the chipped mugs I'd been using in that cramped temporary apartment. It was a small thing, but symbolic of the peace I had finally found. My phone buzzed on the nearby table. Meeting confirmed for tomorrow, 10 a.m. Contracts finalized. It was from Emilio, my lawyer. A small smile played on my lips. Tomorrow, the final piece of the puzzle would fall into place. The sale of Gerald's precious vintage car collection would be complete. The proceeds deposited directly into my account. He had been so proud of those cars, flaunting them like trophies to his new circle of friends. He'd even bragged to Marcus, I'd heard, about how he'd gotten them for a steal after the divorce. A steal, he'd said. He hadn't even noticed they were missing from the garage until weeks after I'd quietly arranged their transport. He'd been too busy celebrating his newfound freedom, too absorbed in his new life with his significantly younger girlfriend, to notice the gradual emptying of his prized possession space. Thinking about tomorrow, my reflection startled me as Eleanor, my dear friend, entered the room. She held two glasses of wine, a knowing glint in her eyes. I hadn't told her every detail, but she understood the essence of my plan, the quiet satisfaction I was seeking. "You look like the cat that swallowed the canary," she added, handing me a glass. "Something like that," I admitted, a chuckle escaping my lips. It felt good to finally acknowledge the truth, to own the small, private victory I had orchestrated. "It's not about the money." "Not really," I said, swirling the wine in my glass. "Oh, I know that," Eleanor replied, settling onto the sofa beside me. "It's about taking back control. It's about showing them that you're not someone to be dismissed, to be discarded like an old piece of furniture." Her words struck a chord. For so long, I'd defined myself by my role as wife and mother. My entire world had revolved around Gerald, Marcus, and Stephanie, around creating a comfortable, loving home for them. When Gerald announced he was leaving, and Marcus sided with Stephanie and Julian, I felt like I'd lost not just my family, but a part of myself. I'd allowed myself to become invisible, a supporting player in their lives. Now, I was reclaiming my story. The next morning, I arrived at Amelia's office with a quiet confidence I hadn't felt in months. Julian was already there, pacing nervously. He gave me a curt nod, avoiding eye contact. "Mrs. Peterson," he said stiffly, "I'm not sure why we're meeting here. My lawyer assured me everything was finalized." He seemed agitated, his usual smooth composure fractured. "There's just one small detail to address, Julian," I replied calmly, taking a seat opposite him. Amelia placed a folder on the table between us. "Before we proceed with the final transfer," she said, Addressing Julian, Mrs. Peterson has one additional stipulation. Julian frowned, his eyes flicking to the folder, then back to me. Stipulation, he repeated, his voice tight. Amelia opened the folder and slid a document across the table. Mrs. Peterson is the sole owner of this property, she explained, her voice crisp and professional. The property you believed your family was purchasing. Julian's face paled. He snatched the document, his eyes scanning the lines of text. This can't be right, he stammered. We were told. He looked at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. You were told what I wanted you to be told, I said, my voice steady. I allowed you to believe you were buying this house, allowed you to make plans, to envision your future here. I paused, letting the silence hang heavy in the air. This house, I continued, was never for sale. It was the final piece of my plan. The look on Julian's face was priceless, a mixture of shock, anger, and a dawning realization of how thoroughly he'd been outmaneuvered. He sputtered, trying to form a coherent argument, but words failed him. He had nowhere to go. I had purchased this house, this beautiful, modern home with the breathtaking view, using the proceeds from the sale of Gerald's cars. He had unwittingly financed my new beginning, my escape from their carefully constructed narrative of my insignificance. This item believable, he finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. Perhaps, I said, rising to my feet. But it's also entirely legal. I glanced at Amelia, who gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. You and Stephanie can, of course, continue to rent the property from me, I added, a hint of steel in my voice, at the appropriate market rate. Naturally, I turned to leave, the sunlight streaming through the windows of Amelia's office, warming my face. The memory of Stephanie's dismissive words was finally gone, replaced by a sense of quiet triumph. I had rebuilt my life, not just financially, but emotionally. I had taken back control, and in doing so, I had found a strength I never knew I possessed. As I stepped out into the bright morning, I knew this wasn't just the end of one chapter, but the beginning of a whole new story, one that I would write myself.